My son was waiting for me to die to sell my company. He should have read the will. The hallway outside my office smelled like machine oil and coffee gone cold. That smell had lived in this building for 40 years. It had soaked into the concrete walls, the ceiling tiles, the rubber mats on the floor. It was the smell of work, of early mornings and late nights, and hands that never stopped moving. I was reaching for the light switch when I heard Julian's voice through the cracked door of my office. Not the conference room, not the break room, my office. The one with the desk I built from scrap oak the year the company turned its first profit. The one with the window that overlooked the factory floor where 63 people earned their living because I decided 40 years ago that hunger was something I would never feel again. He was on the phone, leaning back in my chair. I could hear the leather creak, the same creak it made when I sat in it, except he hadn't earned the right to make that sound. Once the old man steps aside, he said, "We're selling the land and moving to Florida. I'm done playing shopkeeper." Shopkeeper. The word landed harder than a hammer on cold steel. He laughed, a short, confident laugh. The kind men use when they believe the future has already been decided in their favor. The kind that doesn't ask permission because it assumes everything is already owed. I stood in the dark hallway with my hand still raised toward the light switch. My fingers hovered an inch from the plastic plate. I could feel the wall's coolness against my knuckles. The fluorescent tube above me was off, and the only light came from the thin strip beneath my office door, where my son sat in my chair talking about my death like it was a business opportunity. "The building alone is worth 3.2, he said. "The equipment, maybe another 800. We liquidate, we're looking at a clean 4 mil before taxes." He had done the math. That was the part that made my chest go tight. He hadn't guessed. He hadn't estimated. He had calculated the value of everything I built, the way an appraiser walks through a house that doesn't belong to them yet. I lowered my hand from the light switch. I stood in the dark and listened to my own succession plan dissolve like sugar in hot water. "My name is Arthur Calloway. I am 72 years old. I have lived in the same town my entire life, worked in the same industry since I was 17, and built this company from a single rented unit with a concrete floor that cracked every winter. I didn't start with capital. I started with hunger. Real hunger. The kind that wakes you at 3 in the morning and sits on your chest like a stone. The kind that teaches you to eat fast because you're not sure when the next meal is coming. The kind that makes you swear, at 14 years old, standing in a kitchen with an empty refrigerator and a mother who wouldn't look you in the eye, that your children will never feel this. I kept that promise. Every day for 40 years, I kept it. I built a manufacturing company that made precision parts for 3 industries. I employed people who stayed for decades. I paid mortgages and college tuitions and retirements with the work that came off that floor. I didn't build a business. I built a wall between my family and the life I came from. I just didn't realize that walls can make the people behind them soft. His voice dropped lower. Not to a whisper. To the tone of a man sharing strategy with someone he trusted more than me. "The ink won't even dry on the death certificate before I've got buyers lined up," he said. "There's a group out of Dallas that specializes in industrial acquisitions. They strip the brand, keep the contracts, and flip the property. Clean, fast. Strip the brand. 40 years of a name painted on the side of a building. 40 years of handshake deals and repeat clients, and a reputation built one delivered order at a time. He wanted to hand it to strangers in Dallas who would peel my name off the wall like old paint." I pressed my back against the hallway wall. The concrete was cold through my shirt. I could feel my heartbeat in my wrists. Not fast, slow, heavy, the beat of something winding down instead of speeding up. That was the moment hope stopped breathing. Not the hope I had for the company, the hope I had for him. The quiet, stubborn hope that fathers carry for sons who disappoint them. The hope that says maybe he'll change, maybe he'll see it, maybe tomorrow. Tomorrow had arrived, and it sounded like a liquidation plan. The first shop was a single rented unit on Garfield Road, 1,200 square feet, a rolling metal door that stuck in the rain. A heater bolted to the wall that worked when it felt like it and quit when it didn't. I was 22. I had $80 in a coffee can, a used lathe I bought from a retired machinist named Walt Briggs, and a notebook full of numbers I had written during lunch breaks at the factory where I worked second shift. The concrete floor had a crack running from the door to the back wall. I stepped over it every morning like a crack in the earth. The lights buzzed. The roof leaked in the southwest corner. I put a bucket there and emptied it twice a day during April. My first order was 64 steel bushings for a local tractor supply company. I machined them by hand. Each one took 11 minutes. I worked 14 hours straight to finish the batch and delivered them in the back of a borrowed pickup truck. The owner inspected 3 of them, nodded, and handed me a check for $412. I sat in that truck and stared at the check for a long time. It was the first money I had ever earned that felt like mine. My wife, Lorraine, was alive then. She worked the front desk at a dentist's office during the day and kept the books for my shop at night. She sat at our kitchen table with a calculator and a cup of tea, entering numbers into a ledger while I showered the grease off my arms in the bathroom down the hall. She never complained. Not once. Not when the shop lost money for the first 2 years. Not when I missed our anniversary because a shipment was late. Not when I forgot her birthday entirely the year Julian was born because I was rebuilding a hydraulic press that had blown a seal at 3 in the morning. She just kept the books. Kept the house. Kept me steady when the ground felt like it was moving. I missed my 35th birthday making payroll. Lorraine bought a cake and left it in the break room fridge. By the time I remembered, the frosting had gone flat and the candles were still in the bag. She had written, "Happy Birthday, Arthur," on the box in blue marker. I ate a slice at midnight, alone, while the calculator hummed beside me. That cake tasted like everything I was building and everything I was missing at the same time. The smell of the shop never left me. Sawdust. Machine oil. The sharp metallic scent that rises off freshly cut steel. It lived in my clothes, in my truck, in the creases of my hands, no matter how many times I scrubbed them. Lorraine used to say I smelled like a factory, and she said it the same way some women say their husband smells like cologne. Like it was just part of who I was, something familiar, something she trusted. When Julian was small, he used to sit on the shop floor and watch me work. He'd stack metal scraps into towers and knock them down. He wore yellow ear protection that was too big for his head, and it made him look like a small pilot preparing for takeoff. I thought he loved it. I thought the noise and the heat and the rhythm of the machines were entering his blood the way they had entered mine. I thought I was passing something down. But children don't always absorb what you show them. Sometimes they just endure it until they're old enough to leave. Julian stopped coming to the shop when he was 14. He never told me why. I never asked. That silence grew between us like a wall neither of us built on purpose. Marcus Delaney swept those floors with me. That's not a figure of speech. In the first year, when I couldn't afford a cleaning crew, Marcus and I swept the shop every Friday evening after the last order went out. He was 21. I was 22. He answered a classified ad I put in the newspaper that said helper needed, hard work, low pay, long hours. He showed up the next morning in steel-toed boots he had borrowed from his brother. 30 years later, he still wore the same brand. He had gone through maybe 40 pairs, each one broken in the same way. The leather creased across the top of the left foot where he braced himself against the welding table. Marcus knew every bolt in that building, every employee by first name, every machine by sound. He could tell you which lathe needed oil by the pitch of its hum. He could tell you which welder was having a bad day by the rhythm of their arc. He never asked for a title. I gave him one anyway. Floor manager. He shrugged when I told him. "I just do the work, Arthur," he said. "Title doesn't change the work." He was right. It never did. Marcus was the only man I trusted with the building when I wasn't in it. There was a night, maybe 15 years ago, when Marcus and I sat on the loading dock after a long shift. The parking lot was empty. The sky was the kind of dark that only happens in October. We shared a thermos of coffee that tasted like it had been sitting too long, and neither of us complained. "You ever think about what this place is?" I asked him. He looked at me sideways. "It's a factory, Arthur." "No," I said. "It's a wall. I built it between my children and the hunger I grew up with. Every order we ship, every payroll we make, that's another brick. Marcus nodded slowly. He didn't say anything for a while. Then he poured himself another cup and said, "Walls keep things out, but they also keep people from seeing what's on the other side." I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. Now I do. I built a wall so high that Julian never saw what was behind it. He never felt the cold, never tasted the nothing, never lay awake at 3 a.m. wondering if tomorrow would be the day everything collapsed. I protected him from the thing that made me. And in doing so, I made sure he would never become it. Julian started coming around more often once my hair turned fully gray. Not gradually. All at once. Like a switch had been flipped. Like the gray was a signal he had been waiting for, a visible countdown that told him the inheritance was getting closer. He would arrive on Tuesday mornings in a suit that cost more than our first industrial lathe. Italian wool, slim cut. The kind of fabric that wrinkles if you look at it wrong and has never been inside a factory for longer than 10 minutes. He would walk through the front office and nod at the receptionist without saying her name. He had known her for 12 years. Her name was Phyllis. She kept butterscotch candies in a jar on her desk and remembered every employee's birthday. Julian didn't know her name. He would pass through the hallway, past the production schedule board, past the safety posters. Marcus updated every quarter, past the framed photo of our first delivery truck that I hung on the wall in 1989. He never looked at any of it. He looked at square footage. He looked at ceiling height and electrical capacity and the age of the HVAC units mounted on the roof. He looked at everything the building was worth. He never saw what it meant. He sat in my chair before I invited him. Every time. Without hesitation, without asking. Like the leather and the oak and the view of the factory floor were already his. The chair was old. I had bought it second-hand from a furniture liquidator in the next county the year I moved into this office. It had a tear on the left armrest that I covered with a strip of electrical tape in 1996, and the tape was still there. Julian would lean back and cross one ankle over his knee. He would pull out his phone and scroll while I talked. Not rudely, exactly. Just absently. The way people do when they've already decided that what you're saying isn't important enough to hold their full attention. I would be explaining a new contract, a production shift, a capital expenditure I was considering, and his eyes would drift to the screen in his hand like it held something more urgent than the man who built everything around him. I let it happen. I didn't correct him. I didn't say, "That's my chair." I didn't say, "Put the phone down." I didn't say any of the things a father should say when his son treats him like a man whose time is almost up. I just kept talking. That was my mistake. One Thursday afternoon, Julian walked the factory floor. Not to learn, not to observe, to assess. He moved through the rows of machines with his hands in his pockets and his chin tilted slightly upward, the posture of a man surveying property he intended to sell. He stopped near the welding station where 3 men were working. Carl Jessup, Rudy Fontaine, Emmett Sayers. Between them, they had 78 years of experience on that floor. Carl had trained Julian how to tie his boots when the boy was 9 and insisted on following me into the shop. Julian watched them for a moment. Then he leaned toward me and said, just loud enough for me to hear, "How much is this section costing us in overhead?" Overhead. He called them overhead. Men who arrived every morning before the sun came up. Men who stayed late when orders ran behind. Men whose hands were scarred from the work that paid for Julian's private school, his college tuition, his first car, and the suit he was standing in. Overhead. I didn't answer. I just looked at him for a long time. Long enough that he shifted his weight and checked his watch. That gold watch had been his graduation gift from me. He checked it like time was his, and the rest of us were borrowing it. The visits continued every Tuesday, sometimes Thursday. He would come with new information, new language, new strategies he had learned from podcasts and business seminars and people who had never built anything with their hands. Operational efficiency, he would say. Market positioning. Exit strategy. Exit strategy. That was his favorite. He used it the way some people use prayer. With faith. With repetition. With the absolute certainty that the words themselves carried power. One afternoon, he sat across from me with a printed spreadsheet, columns of numbers I hadn't asked for. Revenue projections, liquidation scenarios, estimated real estate values. Private equity is interested, he said. A firm out of Charlotte. They've been watching us for 2 years. We could triple the company's value overnight if we package it right. Triple the value, as if 40 years of work could be packaged like a product on a shelf. As if the people on that floor were inputs in an equation. As if loyalty had a multiplier you could apply with a spreadsheet and a handshake. I looked at the numbers, then I looked at him. Who told you to run these? I asked. He smiled, the smile of a man who believes he's the smartest person in the room. Nobody tells me, Dad. I just pay attention. There was a moment, one I keep returning to, that told me everything I needed to know about the man my son had become. It was a Saturday. The factory was closed, but I was there, the way I always was, checking on a shipment that was due Monday. Marcus was there too, inventorying parts in the back. Julian showed up unannounced. He wanted to show me the proposal from the Charlotte firm. He walked in holding a leather portfolio and wearing shoes that had never touched a factory floor. Marcus came out of the stockroom carrying a clipboard. He nodded at Julian. "Morning," he said. Julian didn't respond. He walked past Marcus the way you walk past a piece of equipment, without acknowledgement, without recognition, without the basic courtesy of returning a greeting to a man who had been part of this company since before Julian was born. Marcus didn't react. He just went back to his clipboard. But I saw it. The dismissal, the invisibility Julian had assigned to a man who had given this company 3 decades of his life. I took the portfolio from Julian's hand. I set it on the desk without opening it. "Go home," I said. He looked confused. "I just got here." "Go home, Julian." He left without understanding what he had done. That was the problem. He never understood. That night, after Julian left and Marcus went home, and the building sat empty around me, I stayed in my office with the lights off. The factory floor below was silent. The machines were still. But they made sounds even when they weren't running. Small sounds. The ticking of metal cooling after a long day. The faint hum of a compressor winding down. The soft click of a breaker somewhere in the electrical panel. It sounded like a heartbeat slowing. I sat in my chair, the one Julian had started treating as his, and I stared at the window. The parking lot was dark. The floodlight on the south corner of the building cast a long yellow cone across the asphalt. I thought about the hallway, about his voice through the cracked door. "Shopkeeper, liquidation. The ink won't even dry." He wasn't waiting for me to retire. He was waiting for me to die, and he had already divided the spoils. I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out the original incorporation papers. Yellowed edges, a notary stamp from 1983, my handwriting across the signature line, young and sharp and full of something I didn't have a word for then. I had a word for it now. Hope. I read the paper slowly. Every clause, every number. The original capitalization, which was $400 and a handshake with a banker who took a chance on a kid with nothing but a plan and calloused palms. My handwriting looked different then, tighter, more deliberate. The letters leaned forward, like they were in a hurry to become something, like the pen itself knew where it was going, even if the hand holding it wasn't sure. Lorraine's name was on the second page. Co-signer. She had signed it at the kitchen table the night before we filed, with a cup of tea cooling beside her elbow and a look in her eyes that said she believed me. Not in the business. In me. She died 11 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and merciless. 61 years old. She was sitting in the garden when the first pain hit, and 6 months later, I was standing in a cemetery holding a handful of dirt I couldn't bring myself to drop. I kept her signature on the incorporation papers. Never amended it. Never removed her name. Julian didn't know that. He didn't know a lot of things. He didn't know that the company he wanted to sell was signed into existence by a woman he barely remembered to visit in the hospital. I whispered into the empty room, and the sound of my own voice startled me. It was thin, tired, but clear. "I didn't raise a successor," I said. "I raised a beneficiary." The words sat in the dark like something that had been waiting a long time to be spoken. They didn't echo. The office was too small for that. They just hung in the air and settled onto everything like dust. A successor builds, A beneficiary collects. A successor understands what came before and carries it forward. A beneficiary checks the balance and plans the withdrawal. Julian had never built anything. Not in this company. Not anywhere. He had a degree in business from a school I paid for. He had contacts he made at conferences I funded. He had opinions about efficiency and strategy and market timing, all of it learned from men who had never swept a factory floor at 11 o'clock at night because a shipment was due in the morning. He knew the language of business. He didn't know the body of it. The ache, the fear. The Friday nights when payroll was short and the only option was to skip your own check and hope the next order came in by Monday. I closed the incorporation papers. I had given him everything he wanted. I had never made him earn anything he needed. That realization was heavier than regret. Regret is backward-looking. It mourns what you did. This was different. This mourned what you didn't do. The lessons you skipped, the hardships you smoothed away. The moments you should have said no, but said yes, because his face looked like his mother's, and you couldn't bear to disappoint it. I gave Julian a job title he didn't earn. I gave him an office he didn't fill. I gave him access to decisions he wasn't ready to make, and meetings he sat through without contributing anything except his last name. I thought proximity would teach him. That if he stood close enough to the work would enter him the way it had entered me. But proximity without consequence is just tourism. He walked through the factory the way visitors walk through museums, looking, nodding, never touching, and now he was planning to sell it. All of it. The machines, the building, the name, the people. He was going to trade 40 years of my life for a number on a check and a condo in Florida. I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I stood up, turned on the desk lamp, and opened my phone to a number I hadn't called in 2 years. Evelyn Rourke, estate attorney. The woman who helped me plan for everything except this. Evelyn Rourke's office was on the second floor of a brownstone on Walcott Street. The staircase creaked. The banister was original brass, polished thin by decades of palms. The hallway smelled like polished wood and lemon cleaner, the kind of clean that felt deliberate. Her door was open when I arrived. She was sitting behind a desk that looked older than both of us, writing something with a fountain pen on ivory paper. The scratch of the nib against the grain sounded permanent. Like whatever she wrote couldn't be undone. She looked up when I walked in. No surprise, no small talk. Just a steady gaze through reading glasses that sat low on the bridge of her nose. "Arthur," she said, "sit down." I sat. The chair was firm. No give. The kind of chair that makes you sit up straight whether you want to or not. "I need to change my will," I said. She set the pen down, folded her hands. "Why now?" "Because my son is planning to sell the company the moment I die." I heard him say it. "And I need to make sure that what I built outlives both of us." She opened a drawer and pulled out a clean legal pad. "Tell me what you want," she said. I told her everything. The visits, the spreadsheets, the private equity firm from Charlotte, the phone call in my office, the word shopkeeper and the way it sounded coming from the mouth of a man I had fed, clothed, educated, and loved without condition for 38 years. Evelyn listened without interrupting. She made notes in a handwriting so precise it looked like type. When I finished, she tapped the end of her pen against the pad twice and looked at me. "You have options," she said. "You can disinherit him outright. You can place conditions on the inheritance. Or you can build a structure that protects the company regardless of what he does." "I don't want to punish him," I said. She raised one eyebrow, just slightly. Enough to say she had heard that sentence before, from other fathers and other chairs, and that it usually preceded the most punishing clauses she had ever drafted. "Then what do you want?" I thought about Marcus sweeping the floor at closing time, about Carl and Rudy and Emmett, about Phyllis and her butterscotch jar, about the crack in the concrete I had stepped over for 40 years. "I want to give him what I never gave him," I said, "a reason to earn it." She nodded, uncapped her pen. "Then let's build it." The structure took 3 weeks to finalize. Evelyn was meticulous. Every clause was tested, every contingency mapped. She brought in a trust specialist to review the language. They argued about phrasing the way surgeons argue about incisions. Precisely. Without emotion. With full understanding that one misplaced word could undo everything. The company would move into an irrevocable living trust upon my death. Julian would be named as the conditional beneficiary, not the owner, the beneficiary. The distinction mattered. To assume operational control, Julian would be required to work in the company, not as an executive, not as a consultant, not as a name on a letterhead. Entry level, full-time, 5 years, reporting directly to Marcus Delaney. He would clock in at 7, he would clock out at 4. He would learn every station on the floor, from raw material intake to final quality inspection. He would earn the same starting wage as every other new hire. No car allowance, no expense account, no corner office, 5 years. That was the condition. 5 years of showing up, doing the work, learning the names, and understanding what it meant to build something one day at a time. If he completed the 5 years, the company was his, fully, unconditionally. If he didn't, everything changed. If he quit at any point during the 5 years, or if he refused the terms entirely, the company would transfer to an employee ownership cooperative. Every person who had worked at Callaway Manufacturing for more than 5 years would hold an equal share. Marcus Delaney would serve as trustee for the first decade, overseeing operations and ensuring the company's survival. The building could never be sold outside the cooperative without a 2/3 vote of the employee owners. The name would remain. The contracts would be honored. The machines would keep running. Julian would receive a modest financial settlement, enough to live comfortably, not enough to live lavishly, and not a single square foot of the factory floor. Evelyn read the final clause aloud in her office. Her voice was steady, no inflection, just law. When she finished, she looked at me. "Are you certain?" I was, more certain than I had been about anything since the day I signed those incorporation papers at a kitchen table with Lorraine's name beside mine. "I'm giving him the only thing I never gave him," I said quietly, "a chance to earn his keep." I signed the document. The pen didn't shake. My hand was steady, the way it had always been when the work mattered. I died on a Wednesday. I know that sounds strange to narrate your own ending, but this is my story and I'll tell it the way I choose. The heart attack came at 6 in the morning, in the kitchen, while I was pouring coffee into the same mug I had used for 20 years. The mug hit the tile and broke into 3 pieces. The coffee pooled around my shoes. Marcus found me. He had a key. He always had a key. The funeral was 4 days later. Small, respectful, the factory shut down for the day. Every employee came. Phyllis brought flowers from her garden. Carl Jessup stood at the back and didn't speak to anyone but stayed until the last person left. Julian arrived in a designer black suit, Italian cut, fresh haircut, shoes polished to a mirror shine. He shook hands with people he didn't recognize and accepted condolences with the practiced ease of a man who had been preparing for this day longer than anyone knew. He carried himself like a king arriving at his coronation. He had a keychain in his jacket pocket with a label already on it. I know because Marcus saw it. It said "Office" in Julian's handwriting. He had made his own key before the casket was closed. The reading of the will took place in Evelyn Rourke's office 3 days after the burial. The staircase creaked the same way it had when I climbed it. The brass banister caught the light the same way. The scratch of Evelyn's pen was the same. Only the people in the room were different. Julian sat in the chair I had sat in. He crossed one ankle over his knee. He pulled out his phone, then seemed to think better of it and put it back. Marisa, my daughter-in-law, sat beside him. Marcus sat near the window, arms folded, saying nothing. Evelyn opened the folder. She read the preliminary sections, the personal bequests, the charitable contributions, the small instructions about the house and the truck and Lorraine's jewelry. Then she reached the company clause. She read it slowly. No drama, no inflection. Just the words, delivered with the precision of a woman who understood that law doesn't need volume to carry weight. Julian's face changed in stages. Confusion first, then disbelief, then something cold and sharp that moved across his features like a shadow passing over open ground. "Entry level," Evelyn read. "Full-time employment, 5-year minimum, reporting to the designated floor manager." Julian's hands, soft, manicured, uncalloused, tightened around the armrest. "You mean I have to work?" he asked. Marcus didn't smile. He simply looked at Julian and nodded once. The nod of a man who had been working for 40 years and didn't consider the question worth answering with words. The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that has texture, that presses against your skin and makes you aware of your own breathing. Julian stared at the document in Evelyn's hands. His lips moved slightly, reading the clause again from a distance. The cooperative provision, the 5-year requirement, the name of Marcus Delaney printed in black type beside the word trustee. He looked at his hands, turned them over slowly, palms up, then palms down, studying them the way a man studies a tool he has never used. Those hands had never bled on the shop floor, never gripped a wrench until the skin tore, never carried a box of parts from the loading dock to the stockroom in January when the heater was broken and your breath came out in clouds. Those hands had held spreadsheets and phones and portfolios and wine glasses. They had signed checks I wrote and shaken hands I arranged and opened doors I built. He spent 38 years waiting for my ending. He never expected me to plan his beginning. The company is still standing. The machines still run. The floors still get swept on Friday evenings. And somewhere in that building, there is a crack in the concrete that runs from the front door to the back wall. It has been there since 1983. Nobody has ever fixed it. Because some things aren't broken. They're just proof that the foundation held.